My name is Siobhan Hyde. I'm here with Tim Goulding in Aherlow Castle in the Glen of the Downs in Tipperary, and we're here today to talk about Tim's life as a painter, a musician, a writer, an artist all around. To start maybe at the beginning, we talked earlier and you said that you had won a prize in school that inspired you from an early age to start an artistic career or to have an interest.
Mm-hmm. Well, at school I considered myself a poet. I was a sort of beatnik in those days. We had serious evenings discussing poetry and life in underground cabins and in railway stations, and so we were sort of the beat generation. And I reckoned I was going to be a poet, but I had a wonderful art master, and he only taught me two things. He said, one was there's no cheating in art, and the second thing is you're all the same boys, you're all different. That's all he ever said to us. But anyway, he was a great inspirer for me, Mr. Drew, very aptly named teacher. And so I got more and more interested in painting, and I won the school art prize at Winchester College. And that sort of inspired me to continue. But it wasn't really that. That's not why I started painting. I started painting because I was driving up to Callery Bog one day, and I looked out the window of the car when I was about 15 and saw a light on some fields, and I thought that was so inspiring to me. I'd love to paint. I'd love to paint that. And actually we were going up to visit Camille Souter, who lived up there on Callery Bog, and she became a great friend and a great inspiration to me. And she was a great friend of my dad's, and he collected her work and encouraged his mates to buy her work. So
a wonderful influence from you.
Wonderful influence, yeah.
Did she in any way teach you, or was it just that you had the work in your home?
No, Camille's very shy to talk about her work, even to this day. But she obviously showed us her work, and she'd come and visit, and I just was swept away with her approach. I've always thought she's like an Irish impressionist. If she lived in the south of France, you know, like a Bonnard, but it was like Bonnard came to Ireland and painted the mist, so it's all greens and greys. I've always said the Irish flag should be green and grey, in fact.
Yes. Your father was a great advocate of the arts, Irish and European artists, and you've talked about many people coming into the house, so it sounded like it was a pot of cultural experience and influence.
It was. I mean, in a way my father was my art teacher, and because we looked through catalogues, we went to exhibitions, we discussed painting, and we had a lot of contemporary Irish artists visiting the house, because he had a great collection of contemporary Irish art. Yes, in fact, when my father died in 1982, he contracted cancer, and I was living in West Cork, he was up in Darwood Cottage in Enniskerry, and I came up on the pretext, because he hadn't been told he had a fatal illness, and we were told not to speak to him about it, or not to mention it was fatal. So I came up on the pretext that I wanted to paint in the garden. And it turned out I ended up painting a whole exhibition of the Dargle River, and I had that show in 1982 in the David Hendricks Gallery. Was it 1982, and the Dargle River paintings, and they were painted outside on the river, and it was almost like he painted the show with me, because I'd come in every evening with the paintings, and he'd be in the bed, and we'd put them up beside the bed, and he'd critique them and suggest this and that, and then I'd go out the next day and bring it back, and it was a wonderful collaboration.
How long? 6 months?
It was about 6 months as he was dying, and you know, in the end he couldn't eat for the last weeks and weeks, but he used to bring pictures from his collection and put them by his bed and look at them for hours, and he said, the paintings are like food for me now. It was so moving. So people would be coming through the house like Paddy Collins, Camille Souter, Barry Cook, Pat Scott, Cecil King, all those names from that generation. Yes. So I got to know a lot of them. Barry Cook taught me how to stretch a canvas.
Wonderful.
And then there were European artists came too. I suppose the one I particularly remember is Henry Moore, because he visited my studio and he gave a critique of a painting I was working on. I was working on a little a little small canvas of 4 pots on a shelf, sort of a la Morandi really. But they were kind of abstract and realistic at the same time. And Henry Moore said that will never succeed. You can't keep it on the picture, you can't keep it flat on the picture plane and create an illusion of depth at the same time. And so you're saying you can't do what you're doing, and I've been trying to do that ever since.
That's interesting, because I read earlier an article that Aidan Dunn wrote about your the Hibernia series in the year 2000, and he said that there was an underlying unity that balanced realism with abstraction, but he said that the influence was nature. Would that be true to say?
Yes, I think I've always been a nature painter. I mean, nature's my master, I would say. Yeah, so that has run through my work, plus the sense of place where I live in West Cork. So I live amongst rocks, and rocks have been a big influence. Rocks and mist and light. Light is the other thing. But painting for me has been a journey of discovery. So it's a continuous journey. It's like my diary. So I mean, you wouldn't be writing in your diary what you wrote when you were 18, when you're 60. In fact, you'd be embarrassed. And so, you know, I kind of react against the idea of making a product like that. You know, this is a Tim Goulding painting, and he'll be doing that for the next 40 years. And I mean, I know some painters have stuck with one thing, but I like to react to what's happening in my life. Whatever's happening in my life is reflected in my work.
But I still feel that one knows it's a Tim Goulding, that there is a thread of identity that is you, that is in your work.
Yeah.
Would you disagree with that?
No, I would agree with that, but a lot of people don't see that.
Okay.
And I mean, my wonderful dealer, David Hendricks, who was a great friend, and I showed with him up until his death in 1972, I think, the Hendricks Gallery.
Yes, yes.
He always saw that, and he absolutely allowed me to follow the direction I was going in, and encouraged me. And he said he saw the thread running through.
Yes.
Because I've always said that, and I suppose growing up in a house with a wonderful collection of art, and some of it, well, a lot of it was abstract, but a lot of it was representational. And I've never seen a difference between the two. I mean, I always say if you turn a Chardin still life upside down, it still works as a painting. So I see no difference between the two.
Okay.
You know.
Do you feel you have succeeded in that journey to merge the two? Is that the word you used?
Merge, yeah. Yes, I work on the borderline between realism and abstraction. That's the area I'm really interested in.
Yes.
Although I have worked in a hyper-real way for one exhibition. Because whatever I'm interested in, whatever series, I work in series, so there have been a lot of series over the years, the last 50 years, but there was one series I think of called Reads and Reflections, and I had a show in the Hendricks Gallery, and that was based on some photographs I took in a ditch down in West Cork, of reeds sticking out of the water, and the reflections of them on the water surface, and then looking under the water surface to the decaying reeds. So it was 3 levels, and I did these photographs, and then I painted very large canvases, some of them in very tight realism. They looked like big photographs, and some of them were sort of blown up details that looked totally abstract, completely abstract. So that was probably in the one exhibition, the 2 directions. Yeah. When I moved to West Cork, in Dublin I'd been painting sort of abstract sort of gouaches, which were Brian Fallon of the Irish Times critiqued one, saying it was a cross between Paddy Collins and Camille Souter, which was a lovely compliment.
Wonderful compliment.
But they were very soft and mostly in gouaches and landscape based. But when I went to West Cork in '68, I decided to teach myself to paint, because I hadn't really ever learned much technique. And so I sat outside for maybe 10 years, working from the landscape outside, and sort of taught myself how to match colour. And so I know the colours of West Cork really well. And those paintings, some people thought they looked like photographs, but they're not at all actually. But I mean, some of them, there's one painting I think of, I painted over 10 years, and I'd go to the same spot in August with the same light and the same time of day, year in, year out, until the picture was finished.
Did you finish it?
I did, yeah.
Do you
still have it? Yeah, it's the one of that series I kept for myself. And,
so you talked about dead ends, but I found myself wondering, could that be brought about by exhausting a series?
Yes, absolutely,
okay,
yes,
okay.
you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Because sometimes, I mean, usually there's about 20 or 30 in a series, and then when you get to number 40 or 50, you're beginning to repeat yourself.
Okay.
And it's time to stop.
It's had such a long artistic life, and you've just recently relaunched your website. Congratulations. And it in itself seems to be a retrospective of your life's work, and it's very easy to navigate and see what the thread of Tim Goulding.
Yes.
What more is there to add to that?
Well, there's an ongoing, there's a button that says current, and when you go into current you'll see several different sections, like representational work on the easel, that sort of thing, so that'll be added to continuously. And we're going to have a blog on it, which we don't have at the moment.
Okay.
But it'll actually say news, probably. And then it's also connected to my Facebook page, Tim Goulding Art. So there's whatever I'm working on comes up there as well. So it's a living thing.
Have you found it easy to engage with social media and technology?
Yes,
do you enjoy that end of it?
I do, actually. I do. I'm a bit addicted to Facebook, to be honest.
Okay.
I manage 5 different pages on Facebook. I have my own personal one, Tim Goulding, and then there's Tim Goulding Art, everything happening in my work, and then there's Rudra Nua, which is my pen name, because I write quite a bit, poems and some little booklets.
Okay.
So, and also there's a Tim Goulding music page, and also there's the band I've worked with for years called Dr. Strangely Strange, so that's another page.
Okay. Do you sleep at all?
That's a good point. Not a lot.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. It's too much, actually. I've got to cut it down.
Why?
Well, you know, well, I suppose that, you know, I need to spend more time painting and making music, really.
When we first talked yesterday, you said, when I'm not painting, I don't feel like a painter.
Yes.
So the question really would be, so what does it feel like when you are painting? What does a painter feel
wonderful.
like?
Well, you go into what I call call it sort of dream time. It's when the painting paints you. I mean, my friend Morris Henderson, the painter, the late Morris Henderson, unfortunately, but we used to talk about, people would come down to West Cork and they said, oh, it must be so relaxing to paint and living here in these beautiful surroundings. And Morris and I call it painting instead of painting, because sometimes it is pain, as you know yourself, that sometimes, you know, you can be worrying over something. You eat, sleep and drink the painting that you're working on, and it takes you over completely for a few days. And then a month later you think, how was I ever so concerned about that? It's gone, you know, finished.
Right.
But it's what you're working on that catches your attention and sucks you completely in. And the same with writing, and the same with music.
Okay.
I feel they all come from the same source,
Okay.
the creative source, and they all have one thing in common, that when you go into them you're completely absorbed by them, and the little self and the worrying self and the discursive self and the self that's making judgments all the time, that's put to bed for a while, that disappears, and the best things always happen when you're not there, so to speak.
Okay.
And musicians often tell you that.
Right.
When they're recording, they say, I wasn't playing the music was playing me. Or I wasn't painting the painting was painting me. So that same atmosphere and feeling, which you probably get if you're a gardener, or if you love doing the washing up, which I don't. But
so what's the lead-in to that? What's the discipline of coming to the easel or picking up the guitar or the pen to write? What comes before that?
And that's it. I mean, when I'm sort of working up, I mean, Georgina, my wife, spots this in me, that I'm restless and itchy, and I'd rather clean behind the sink than go into the studio, you know.
Yes, I think that's common.
I think it is. But once you're going, you're going. The same with if you're playing a gig or something. I'd be so nervous before I'd go on stage. Absolutely nervous. I think, why am I ever doing this? Why did I ever say I'd do this? And then once you're there, you're off and you're galloping. Yeah.
The late poet Siobhan Dunn said of you that Tim Goulding leaves his door open so that the winds of change can blow in whatever arrives.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
What did he really mean by that?
Well, I was really pleased with that because, I mean, I did a page in the Great Book of Ireland with Siobhan Dunn. He was a wonderful poet and he was an editor of the Cork Examiner, and we did a page, 2 pages together in the Great Book of Ireland, and he had written the poem and I illustrated around it. And he'd seen my retrospective, mid-term retrospective in the Crawford Gallery about 1990, I think. And unfortunately he died, he was only 39 years old. We were about to do a project together about Goulding Interview. He'd written poems, haiku poems about Goulding Interview, and I was going to illustrate them. We were going to do it together, but he sadly died. Well, I think he recognised that I'm kind of open in my visual work. I'm waiting to pick up the scent, so to speak. I'm out hunting. And it might be fallow for a little while, nothing happening, nothing really inspiring. And then you might see the light on the roof. Or, I mean, one good example, I did a series called Unravel. And that was, I went into a neighbour's house and she was throwing out her old rug that had fallen apart. And the warp and the weft coming apart. And I looked at it, and to me it was like the most precious jewel. And I took it away, and I did a whole series of paintings called Unravel. Beautiful, beautiful colours, you know. And that led on to then, and you know, and one thing leads to another. That series then led on to probably my most favourite show, Patching the Void.
Oh yes.
Which you saw.
Yes.
And
in the Taylor Gallery.
The Taylor Gallery. And that led from the Unravel, because an artist friend of mine saw the Unravel paintings and he thought they were too formal, they were geometrical structure, and he said you should let fly a bit more. You should let the lines take on their own life, you know.
A lot of them kind of dispersed to the edges.
Yes, they did. And a lot of them are based on Japanese paper, which has those funny little black specks and beautiful paper. And so I was copying working in the manner of Japanese paper, and I was using collage as well. Yes,
yes, oh, a wonderful show. Also complemented by a suite of etchings.
Yes, that's right.
Done in the graphic studio, so you have a history there as well, don't you?
I have a great history with graphic studio because Pat Hickey was my teacher and my friend. My dad contacted him and said would he take me on. I was a boy of 17, teach me etching and lithography. So I went down, it was in a basement in Mount Street, and Pat was my teacher, and he thought I was rubbish, you know. He said to my dad he'd never make a painter.
Okay. And, he didn't spare his words.
No, he didn't, no. But in latter years we became very friendly. He actually ended up buying a big painting of mine, which was a huge compliment, of course. But yeah, I was working with the likes of Gerard Dillon was there, John Behan, Nora McGuinness, Anne Yates, John Kelly. Those were the people.
Yes.
And it was a lovely feeling down there.
All founder members, actually.
I think, are they founder members?
Yes, yes. A lot of them are, yes. Or were.
Yeah. So then later on in 2006, I think it was, I came back to the graphic studio in Pierce Street and did a whole series of Mexican wall paintings. Large, colourful carborundum prints mostly, with some etching. And that was a really creative time in my life. I just loved working there and completely absorbed by the process.
Yes.
And then later on, when I did the Patching the Void series of paintings, in 2014, I went to the graphic studio and worked nearly 2 months there, on and off, and did this whole series of quite small, well, they were 12-inch square images in different techniques, etchings. And I did 6 of them were done on large sheets of paper with a poem on one side of the page, and the painting on the other side. And poems were printed in letterpress.
Wonderful.
And there was, I think, 6 or 8 of those box sets, one of which is in the National Library now.
Excellent. And can the public go and see that?
I think so, actually. I haven't found out. I know they bought it from the Graphic Studio Gallery,
Okay.
which is one of the main outlets for my work, my printed work.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between working in your own studio down in West Cork and working in a collaborative environment like the Graphic Studio?
Yeah.
What's the difference between those two environments?
Well, I've always been a really private painter. I hate anyone even breathing in the same room where I'm painting. And when I came to the Graphic Studio, I didn't know how I was going to manage, because it's a big open space and maybe 10 people working in the long room. But in fact, I absolutely loved it, because there was great respect there for everyone's work and everyone's privacy. And you'd be working away in your area. Someone might invite you over to look at something, but otherwise you didn't go snooping.
Mm.
But you all had the Mikado biscuits at tea time in the tea room, and you could chat then. But there was I loved that atmosphere of concentration. 7 or 8 people in the room all concentrating on their work and not impinging on each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your work continues to go from strength to strength. So would you like to talk about any particular series that has close to your heart?
I mean, one of the series I was most pleased with was the Patching the Void series, which was the last major show I had in Dublin in the Taylor Galleries in 2014. And another show that I was really keen on was a show I did in 1996 in the Rubicon Gallery. And I was going through a hard time in my life and quite distressed, and I was walking around in the hills at 6 in the morning and all over the place. And I called into a neighbour and for a cup of tea at about 6:30 in the morning, and I was telling him all my woes, and he said, oh, you're like a man in a prison cell, holding the bars looking for the light. And he said, why don't you turn around and look at the darkness? And just saying that triggered a whole show. I took that to heart, and I'd been reading a lot of Krishnamurti's philosophy at the time that was talking about the light and the dark, the duality that we live in, And so I based this whole show on going down into the copper mines in Aherlow. You're not allowed to go down there, by the way, but anyway, I crept in and I painted down there, and in there it was like a magical world. It was like another world altogether, like a treasure chest. Beautiful faces of rock with copper, greens and blues, and when it was wet it was glistening, and there were beams of light coming in from holes above. And I did a whole show that was based on these beams of light lighting up the copper, and I had that show in 1996. And I think that's one of my favourite shows, because it was quite emotional as well, in an abstract sort of way. And I remember getting a lovely letter of appreciation from Louis Le Brocchi, which meant a lot to me at the time. And, well, it still does.
Yeah.
It's
validation, was it?
Yes.
Did you feel validated as a painter?
Yeah, I did.
So
because I was quite well known in Dublin in the 60s, 70s, because I was very much part of the art ghetto, or the art scene, shall we say. I was going to all the openings in the different galleries, and I used to show at the Dawson Gallery for a while. And but then I moved to West Cork in 1968, and I completely left that whole scene, the whole art world. In fact, even to this day, I'm not really very much involved in the art world in Dublin. And it was very Dublin-centric at the time. And I went it was almost like a retreat to the country where it was quiet. I found this beautiful, quiet little village and landscape where I could just work away, teach myself to paint. For me, the creative process is very similar in writing, in painting and in music. Coming up to a painting, I can feel that I want to paint, and there's something else saying, I don't want to paint, I don't want to paint. I'd rather clean behind the fridge than go into the studio. But once you go in there, you go into another world. You go into a dream world, so to speak. And, the discursive mind, the judging mind, the worrying mind, all gone out the window, you're completely focused. It's not anything you do, actually, that you really love doing. You go into a beautiful space, if you like, spaciousness. So, like a painter, that's only one of the things I do in my life. For a long time, it was very much my identity. That was my raison d'etre. I'm a painter, and very ambitious in a way. I worked 10 hours a day for many years, and now I've become much freer in my life, and painting is something I do, but I do it with much less pressure. I do it as a great enjoyment, just something as natural as having a glass of milk or something, you know, and it's more playful. Painting, as you know, is a very solitary business most of the time. In fact, most of my friends are musicians. I get on very well with musicians. We speak the same language, and it's much more social. I mean, the great thing about music is that you could play something here, and someone on the other side of the road who mightn't, the other side of the room, who mightn't even speak your language, might be tapping their foot. It's that universal, and so it's the complete opposite of painting, which is quiet. But then in painting, the kind of paintings I like, I call them slow release paintings, like medicines, you know, that release over 24 hours. I'm more attracted to a painting that reveals its secret slowly, rather than a big bang that's all over.
To you or to the viewer?
To the viewer, yeah.
How important is the viewer?
The viewer doesn't really come into it when I'm painting at all, no. No, I'm just doing the painting for the painting.
Yes.
It's lovely if someone likes it, of course, you know. But me as a viewer, I love paintings that you can look into and dream into, and not everything is given away at once. I like paintings that have a kind of buttery poetry. I love Bonnard, for instance.
Yes.
He's a painter I really love. And he breaks all the rules in painting. Like there might be a sort of violet vase, and he wants to cut down the violet a bit, so he puts black spots over it, you know. He completely breaks the rules.
Yes.
And also painted over many years on the one painting. I mean, I believe he was seen in the Tate when he was an old man, and the curator came into a room and saw an old man at the far end of the gallery with a palette and paints working on a picture. He came rushing over, and it was Bonnard doing a little bit more on his painting.
I'd say that caused some consternation.
I bet it did, yeah.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, I did a commission for the Bank of Ireland in about 1970, a huge painting for the Bank of Ireland in O'Connell Street. It's gone now. And it was 18 foot long and 4.5 foot high. And I did it with 3 assistants. We painted it on a floor in a derelict house in Dorky, and it was we painted it with #1 brushes. It was all pointillist.
Wow.
And we spent 3 months on it, and it was a mandala. It was ellipses, concentric ellipses. So it was like in a mandala, circles, but then stretched. And but I saw it about 20 years later, and I just felt I wanted to do some more on it.
A Bonnard moment.
Exactly, a Bonnard moment. Yeah, and you get that too.
Was that done on panels?
No, it was on one big canvas.
One big canvas. Yeah. Wonderful.
And stretched it on the floor of a derelict ballroom up in Dorky. Killiney, actually. Yeah. Great fun.
So it's been wonderful talking to you this afternoon, Tim, about your work, and I very much value and appreciate your time and the insights into your work and your life, and wish you all the best with further projects. But so maybe to finish up, you'd like to maybe read the poem?
That would be great, and thanks very much, Siobhan.
Okay, my pleasure.
This is a poem called I Am Not. I paint pictures, but I'm not a painter. I play music, but I'm not a musician. I write poems, but I'm not a poet. I'm a father, husband, brother and uncle, but none of these things I am. Everything I do, I am not. Everything I think, I am not. There's a wealth of things that I'm not, but on further inquiry into this, I cannot find a single scrap of what I am. Here begins the vastness of being.